Please, can you help me? My brother.
Don't worry. Helping people and killing people are what I'm best at.
I hope there will be no call to kill anyone, Sirrah.
Every RPG has its cast of misfits. It's a staple of the genre. But I consider Dragon Age 2's cast to be the most dysfunctional cast since Planescape Torment.
Hawke, we were just talking about you.
Carry on. I love to eavesdrop.
Hawke said sarcastically.
You know I hate it when you do that.
Hawke muttered in an angry aside to the dwarf.
If, you two have a moment...
Companions in RPGs are often extremely well developed. They can be funny, tragic, sexy, mysterious, and dangerous. But they also usually hang off of the player character's hip, with their goals usually being the same as the player. Dragon Age 2's companions all have their own lives. They have their own homes, they have their own jobs, they have agency. They have very specific goals, and sometimes, like with Isabella and Anders, they may be in direct conflict with the player's goals. And it's wonderful.
I like big boats, I cannot lie.
We have Carver and Bethany Hawke, the siblings to our protagonist. Bethany wants to be a normal girl. Carver wants to be his own man, away from the shadow of his mage siblings and father.
That's enough, Carver.
Even back home, what could I be? The lone blade in a house of mages. If I excelled, it brought too much attention. That was a waste, eh? Could have found my fortune if Bethany was going to die on your watch anyway.
You will not use her against me like that. She deserves better.
Then you should have given better.
I gave everything. Question me, Mother, yourself, but not that. Well, good talk.
Aveline Valen wants desperately to protect everyone. She's a rock, a force of nature, and she will put her own ambitions and desires on hold for those she cares about.
They will not have you. Not while I breathe.
Isabella, the pirate captain, the easy-going friend who fears having expectations on her. She was once stuck in an abusive marriage, and she will not be tied down again. Meryl, the cheerful and curious little elf girl whose curiosity led her to make deals with demons.
Oh, I didn't hear. You must be the one the Keeper told me about. Anethera.
Fenris, the ex-slave who suffers from memory loss and PTSD. He abhors magic, as he's from the modern Tevinter Imperium, and sees mages as power-hungry and corrupt.
Captain!
Your men are dead, and your trap has failed. I suggest running back to your master while you can.
You're going nowhere, slave!
I am not a slave.
Sebastian Vale, a prince from Starkhaven, a neighboring city-state. Sebastian's family was murdered, and now he's torn between his duties to family and country, and the oath he swore to be a member of the clergy.
This is murder.
No. What happened to my family was murder.
Varric Tetris, who loves his friends and family above all else. He's a businessman and a storyteller. He's also a liar, and every word out of his mouth is a fabrication.
You don't have the style to work Hightown, let alone the Merchants Guild. You might want to find yourself a new line of work.
And then there's Anders, former mage of the Circle Tower, former Grey Warden, former companion of the last game's expansion pack, Dragon Age Awakening, and currently he's the host for the Spirit of Justice.
No!
You will never take another mage as you took him.
Gamlen Amell, Hawke's uncle who blew the entire family fortune out of spite towards his sister Leandra.
I took care of father. I stayed. And on his deathbed, all he could talk about was Leandra. Look, sister, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it, but I did. And there's nothing I can do to get it back.
Viscount Dumar, a reasonable and timid man. On paper, he rules all of Kirkwall. In reality, he is barely the head of his own household. The previous Viscount, a man named Threnhold, attempted to throw out the Templars, who are the single largest fighting force in the city. The Templars killed Threnhold and appointed Dumar to the position, likely because of his weak leadership. Despite this, Dumar is a good man, honorable and intelligent, but he's entirely in over his head.
Meredith at my throat, Orsino at my heels, and a city scared of heretical giants.
Grand Cleric Elfina is the highest-ranking member of the Chantry. This means the Chantry, the Circle, and the Templar Order all fall under her command. She sees her role more as a mentor and not as a leader. She would rather talk to the heads of these organizations and bring about a degree of consensus.
Return to your homes, I implore you. This will not be solved today. And now I must attend to the gallows. They will see reason if the Maker wills it.
The Arashock is the military leader of the Quinari peoples, the nation that must be. The Quinari are a relatively new arrival to Thedas, having sailed down from the tropical North Seas in iron ships only a few hundred years ago. The Quinari live in a merit-based utopia, as long as you don't mind giving up your individuality and aspirations. It is a brutal culture, where children are taken by the state at birth, assessed, and then assigned to their roles in society. They can never deviate from this role, and are only ever referred to by their job title, and not by a more traditional name. The Arashock is one of 3 leaders that govern all Quinari. His faith and duty to his role is absolute. The Arashock is duty-bound to stay in a city he finds morally disgusting, and his veneer of calm is fading away after years of unprovoked attacks and persecution. But even someone with an iron will can reach a breaking point.
No.
He's not getting it. Make your chatty elf say something.
Any insight that would help?
Quinari do not abandon a debt. I humbly request clarification from the Arashock.
I have a growing lack of disgust for you. The dwarf imagined the deal for the Gatlock. He invented a task to prove his worth when he has none.
Then we have wrongly inserted ourselves in your affairs. Would you have us kill this dwarf?
Wait, what now?
First Enchanter Orsino is the head of the Circle of Magi in Kirkwall. By the letter of the law, he shares responsibility to the Circle with the Templar Knight Commander. In actuality, Orsino has very little power, and ultimately is more of a representative to the imprisoned. He's demonized by Templar leadership, and declared an apologist by many of his charges. Orsino fights as hard as he can for his mages, but in order to save face, will overlook many transgressions.
You will not conquer this city without a fight! Cerebos! Vidicopus!
The head of the Templar Order is Knight Commander Meredith. Meredith is a political strong woman.
What I have done is protect the people of this city time and again. What I have done is protect you mages from your curse and your own stupidity.
She sees troubles everywhere, and only she has the conviction to face and triumph against them. She's the true power in Kirkwall. She is the one who removed Viscount Threnhold after he attempted to remove the Templar army. She appointed Dumar as his successor, and she's abused Grand Cleric Elfina's permissiveness in chipping away at the authority of the first Enchanter. There is no middle ground with Meredith, no morally gray areas. There is only righteousness, and there is wickedness. Dragon Age 2's story is told by Varric Tethras in an interrogation by Cassandra Pentagast. For some reason, this was an extremely popular way to open an RPG at the time. The world is at war. The Chantry has fallen into pieces. The Templars have openly abandoned the Chantry's control, and all the circles around Thedas are in open revolt. Cassandra needs answers. And this all started in Kirkwall, with a champion of Kirkwall at its center. The story takes place over the course of 10 years, starting right after the opening of the first game. We play as Hawke, the offspring of a runaway mage and his noble wife. Depending on character class, Hawke is either a war veteran who barely escaped a terrible battle against the Darkspawn, or they're an apostate, a mage hiding from the Templar Order. Regardless, what's left of the Hawke family must flee their war-torn country and become refugees in their mother's old home, Kirkwall. The first act has Hawke and their family living in squalor. Hawke's mother, Leandra Amel, comes from Kirkwall's nobility, but the Amel name has been debased, as they're penniless no-ones now. To restore the family to nobility, Hawke agrees to partner with Bartrand and Varric Tetris, their dangerous expedition into the Deep Roads. Bartrand has it in his head that the Deep Roads, which the dwarves long ago lost to the Darkspawn, will be empty right after a blight. They'll be able to go deeper into lost dwarven history than anyone has ever been, and that's gotta be worth a fortune. Hawke raises the money by hook or by crook, and they lead the expedition down there. It costs them much, but they come out the other end rich. Rich enough to buy the old Amel mansion and transform the Hawke name into one of nobility. Act 1 serves only as the introduction. Almost every major character meets Hawke, and every conflict and theme is introduced here. In my opinion, Act 1 runs a bit long. The central goal to reach 50 gold is a fine one, but money is rather plentiful and it's easy to reach. The Deep Road expedition itself is a fun dungeon with 3 boss fights in it. Not counting DLC, it's the only dungeon crawl in the game. And the bosses are challenging, with the dragon being the toughest fight, and the ancient rock wraith being the best boss fight in the game. It has stages, telegraphs its moves, and forces the player to control the whole team to avoid big damage. The expedition also marks the removal of the surviving Hawke sibling. The first Hawke sibling will always die in the escape from Lothering. Who survives is based on your player class. Warriors and rogues get Bethany, and mages get my personal favorite sibling, Carver. While that choice is out of the player's hand, the fate of the surviving sibling is not. In my case, I left Carver at home while I went on the expedition. This meant Carver took this opportunity to get out from underneath Hawke's shadow and join the Templar Order. But that's just one of 3 possibilities for Carver at the end of this mission. He could die in the Deep Roads, or be forced to join the Grey Wardens. And Bethany likewise has these 3 fates as well. It's up to the player, whether they know it or not, that ends up deciding their fate. Standout missions in Act 1 include Shepherding Wolves, which has a Chantry zealot named Sister Patrice charging Hawke to escort a Quinari mage out of the city. It's a great window into the strict and alien culture of the Quinari, where even a being like this Cerebos, who's been victimized their entire life, would rather submit to suicide than be free.
Certainty is comfort. That is the way of the Qunari. The way of the Qun. Take this secret thing, Basfaran. Remember this day.
Sister Patrice is also revealed to have known the Quinari wouldn't accept the mage back, and wanted the incident to galvanize the faithful, to throw the Quinari out of the city, even if that means sending Hawke to their death.
A massacre of citizens protecting a slave might have forced the Chantry to doubt appeasement, to see the Qunari for the monsters they are.
Another standout is Magistrates Orders, which has Hawke hired by a local magistrate to hunt down an escaped criminal. The criminal turns out to be a serial pedophile rapist whose victims are always elf children. The elves are a marginalized race that no one in the city particularly cares about. Then it's revealed that the killer is also the magistrate's son, and that the magistrate had been covering up for his child's crimes.
That elf girl, she had no right to be so beautiful, so perfect. The demons said she needed to be taught a lesson, like all the others.
When you meet the killer, a man named Kelder, He reveals that he feels a lot of guilt over his actions, and was hoping to commit suicide by cave monster. Kelder knows his father will get him out of jail again, and he knows that once he gets out, he'll succumb to his compulsion to hurt elven children, so he begs Hawke to kill him instead. He never has to ask me twice.
I can't stop. I've tried so many times. Please, you have to kill me. There's no other way.
Goodbye, Kelder.
The truly refreshing thing about this quest is that it's so mundane. Kelder believes he's possessed, but he's no mage. Kelder is simply a serial killer and rapist of elf children. He's aware of his actions and compelled to continue hunting victims. In a setting chock full of magic, demonic, and spiritual explanations in abundance, this true crime-style serial murderer really stands out.
I didn't believe an elf could ever get justice in Kirkwall. I speak for all of us when I say that we are in your debt, Sirrah.
The low points in Act 1 are all the fetch quests. This is a problem throughout the game, but here's a good time to mention it. Fetch quests are a staple of CRPGs. They're nobody's favorite aspect, but they're to be expected. Dragon Age 2 has a very particular style of fetch quest. In your travels, as you loot enemies and containers, you come across plot items. You then get a quest to return this item to its owner, which Hawke supernaturally knows the location of. You turn it in, get a bit of flavor dialogue, some money, and experience. It's not bad in the strictest terms, but it is weird. I have no doubt it's extra content added in quickly as the game's deadline approached, but I think a simple jobs board would have been better, where NPCs put up listings for their missing items, and Hawke agrees to track them down. Act 2 sees the rise of a religious war between elements in the Chantry and hundreds of stranded Qunari warriors. The Viscount, being officially powerless, asks Hawke to help. Hawke's reputation has grown along with their status. They're known to get things done, and more importantly, the Arashock doesn't despise them. So, in an unofficial capacity, Hawke becomes Viscount Dumar's right hand. Together, they try to appease the Chantry zealots long enough to figure out what it is the Qunari want. The zealots are led by Mother Patrice. She sees the Qunari as a religious challenge. Every day the Qunari remain, they collect converts to their religion. The Arashock and his men are warriors, and under the Qun, they do not convert. But Andrastian society is full of inequality, and those disenfranchised, like the elves or the homeless refugees, find a measure of equality under the Qun. The Arashock doesn't want and isn't equipped to convert people, but he also doesn't turn them away. What the Arashock does want, however, is a religious relic, the Tome of Kozlum, lost at sea during a battle. It was entrusted to the Arashock, and he cannot return to Parvalen without it. And so, we have our major characters. Dumar wanting peace but lacking any authority to achieve it, Patrice believing that she must save the souls of the faithful from heretics, and the Arashock just wanting his stolen property back, but the inequality of the city is wearing on him. It all reaches its tipping point when Patrice has the Viscount's only son assassinated and attempts to frame the Qunari, and the Qunari respond. This reduces Dumar further. Now in mourning, the city has no one to lead it. Holy war seems inevitable, but the actual catalyst for the war isn't the Chantry zealots. It's an attempt to arrest 3 elves. The elves killed a city guardsman. They claimed that the guardsman raped their sister. They went to the guard and reported it, but nothing was done. So they took justice into their own hands, and immediately converted to the Qun. Now Aveline wants them turned over for justice.
Kirkwall justice. You have seen the corruption in this city, the suffering that is allowed.
This situation breaks the Arashock. For years he'd been stuck here, and we have witnessed firsthand as he transformed from a grim but well-spoken man to one whose rage could no longer be contained.
A simple act of greed has bound me. We are all denied Parvalen until I alone recover what was lost under my command. That is why this elf and her shadows are unimportant. That is why I do not simply walk from this pustule of a city. Fixing your mess is not the demand of the Qun, and you should all be grateful!
The Qunari take over the city, and it falls to Hawke to save it. There are multiple ways to end the Qunari threat, and not all of them result in the Arashock's death. But in the end, Knight Commander Meredith, the closest thing to a head of state left in Kirkwall, names Hawke the Champion of Kirkwall. This is a political title in the Free Marches that cannot be inherited or sought. It is only appointed through blood and sacrifice, and for performing a great deed that cannot be debated or denied.
It appears Kirkwall has a new champion.
Act 2 is the game at its absolute best. The two villains, Patrice and the Arashock, are handled perfectly. Aveline's journey as guard captain is tested, and ultimately I believe she fails that test here. And if the player recruited Isabella, it is revealed that she is the one who stole the Qunari relic, and that her character arc and the relationship she has with Hawke is developed here through that. Everything dovetails nicely. You feel as though you're stuck in a political quicksand, where every action only pulls you further down. And then there's the Arashock. I'm sure you've noticed that I love the Arashock. He's my favorite Dragon Age villain, and that's because he's the hero of his own story. He has one goal, and he pursues it with a single-minded devotion. But he's in a strange city of extreme wealth and abject poverty. A segregated city where elves are forced to live in a ghetto without basic rights that humans enjoy. And the Arashock ignores these injustices until he can no longer. As alien and strange as the Qunari are, his rage at injustice is almost admirable, even if the Qunari sense of justice and equality is abhorrent. Act 2 highlights include Night Terrors. Night Terrors is a follow-up to an Act 1 quest called Wayward Son. Fainriel, a half-elf mage, has been having terrible nightmares. His mother asks for your help, and now with the aid of Keeper Marathari, Hawke is ready to become a magical therapist. Fainriel, it turns out, isn't a normal mage. He's a dreamer. Dreamers can control the Fade to a greater degree than a normal mage, and they can enter other people's dreams. Once inside the Fade with Fainriel, Hawke gets transformed into important people in the boy's life, working through his daddy issues and his sense of belonging, until eventually he emerges as a confident and self-actualized individual. Or Hawke can traumatize him to the point that he no longer can distinguish reality from nightmare. Or you can sell his soul to a demon. Or you can help him to become a confident and strong individual, and then kill him anyway. There's quite a few endings, and some of them are quite monstrous. It's also worth noting that the demons plaguing Fainriel can also lure and corrupt any companions brought with you, giving Hawke and the player peeks into each companion's desires and weaknesses, while also allowing a large friendship or rivalry gain once everyone returns to the waking world.
I can't believe I turned on you. With the demon in the Fade, I'm so sorry. Masaranas. I'll understand if you can't forgive me.
The next time you betray me, I'll cut you down.
I won't. I would never. Masaranas.
It's a damn good mission, only let down by the reward being a cheap trash item.
This book belonged to the last dreamer of our tribe. It has a rare magic beyond price. Please, accept it with my gratitude.
Another high point is Raiders on the Cliffs. While walking around the Wounded Coast, you'll stumble into an action movie already in progress. Guards are pinned down fighting Evit's Marauders. Hawke has no idea who any of these people are, although if you've brought Aveline, she does. Still, we come in at the end of the action movie, and we can coordinate our attacks with the guard, charge up the middle on our own, or even just leave because it isn't our fight. This is just a simple, fun side quest. It's nothing serious, and it's one of my favorites. I look forward to it every time I play the game.
They're all dead? I can't believe it.
The low point for Act 2 will be controversial, but all that remains. All that remains is the third and final quest in a chain about hunting down a serial killer in Kirkwall. The finale is brought on because the most recent victim is Leandra Amel, Hawke's mother. The serial killer, a guy named Quentin, is obsessed with bringing back his dead wife. He's been in the sewers for 3 years, chopping up women to construct his Frankenstein's monster, and Leandra had a face that looked just like his dearly departed. So here we are.
And at last, her face. Oh, this beautiful face. I've searched far and wide to find you again, beloved. And no force on this earth will part us.
The first time I saw Frank and Leandra, I laughed. If it was more subdued or creepy, maybe it would have landed better, or if he'd been bleeding her to power his blood magic. As is, I roll my eyes at this. You know the truly frustrating thing? The rest of the quest and its aftermath is so damn good.
I knew you would come.
You know me. I always save the day.
Shh. Now, I'm free. I get to see Bethany again. And your father. But you'll be here alone. I love you. You've always made me so proud.
Hawke can emotionally break down with her mom. Gamblin and Hawke talk like equals for the first time as they share their pain and grief.
I was too late.
So you're to blame. If you'd been quicker or stronger, you could have... She could be... Why her? Why Leandra?
There's a wonderful scene with Hawke and their love interest afterwards.
I know nothing I say will change it. I'm sorry. You were lucky to have her as long as you did. When the pain fades, that's what will matter.
I didn't try hard enough to save her.
She wouldn't want you to blame yourself.
You don't know my mother.
No. And I'm sorry I never will. I'm here for you. Whatever you need.
And Aveline has a beautiful story about taking your time with grief.
My father trained me in all the skills he had been forced to give up. He spent everything to get me into Kaelin's service. Do you know what I remember? When he read to me, stupid things, dragons and heroes. He wouldn't turn a page until I reached over and took his hand. That big man made every step of the story my choice. I loved that. He died of the wasting in Adenirim Ward. Those last weeks, I read to him. I had to take his hand to turn the pages, and I couldn't tell if he was too weak, or if it was the old game. He smiled at that, at his big girl. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Drink?
A glass for those we've lost.
All right then. Benoit Dulac and Leandra Hawke. Don't let anyone tell you when to move on. Take their hand and say, my choice. That's all I have. I'll miss her too.
The entire plot of Act 2 derails for a brief moment just so we can witness Hawke's life fall apart, and I love it. It's perfect. Except, this is so goofy.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
Act 3 is all about mages versus Templars. Right from the get-go, Meredith and Orsino are at each other's throats right outside of Hawke's house. Just so you know, this is going to dominate Act 3. Hawke gets an invitation to the gallows to hunt down 3 apostate mages, then bust up a conspiracy, and then with its third main mission, Anders, our companion, blows up the chantry, which then causes Meredith to declare that she will execute all the Circle mages, despite the fact that no one in the Circle had anything to do with this. Now Hawke must choose sides, defend people who had nothing to do with a terrorist attack from being massacred, or massacre a bunch of people because there's finally an excuse to do so. Meredith will literally walk away from Mage Hawke and Anders after one of them blew up the Chantry and the other one aided and abetted them the entire time, just so she can go after some circle mages. In the end, regardless of player choice, Hawke kills both Orsino, who just goes crazy, and Meredith, who goes Super Saiyan crazy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Act 3 is the shortest act and is by far the worst written. The pieces are all here to end strong, but a combination of rushed development and EA demanding more boss fights caused the game to stumble at its finish line. Anders, Meredith, and Orsino are mostly well written. Anders and Meredith are dark reflections of one another, extremists, more than willing to harm and kill innocents for their beliefs. Orsino is more often than not portrayed as the only sane man, offering rebuttals about how Meredith is overstepping her bounds, both in punishment of mages, but also in her naked power grab and her refusal to allow anyone else to take the Viscount's seat. But then there's this quick line as Orsino transforms into an abomination.
Quentin's research was too evil, too dangerous, so I put it aside. But I see now there is no other way.
I guess he knew the serial killer who killed Leandra and harbored him? There is a letter in Act 2 in the killer's lair that is signed by O. I suppose that's for Orsino. But this kind of development needed some fleshing out, because a quick line of dialogue and a note on the floor feel like a hastily added detail right before the game shipped, just so that we could fight Orsino. Anyway, that's the tale of the champion. Varric ends his story, and Cassandra takes a moment to consider it all.
Please. If you know where the champion is, you must tell me.
He is a hero. A man that the mages would listen to. Someone who was there at the beginning.
The champion could stop this madness before it's too late. He may be the only one who can.
Is that what this is all about? In that case, I wish I could help you.
Then you are free to go, Varric. May the Maker watch over you during the dark times ahead of us.
Same to you, Seeker. Same to you.
And that's Dragon Age 2. Highlights for Act 3 include Gamlen's greatest treasure. Uncle Gamlen, oh how I love you.
I'm not looking for love, but at least I got the money.
This quest isn't just optional, it's entirely missable because it requires you to poke around Gamlen's house with no prompting by the UI. Gamlen has a letter addressed to him about some gem. When asked about it, the always abrasive Gamlen tells us off.
That note mentioned the gem of Arashock. What's that?
It's nothing. Never mind.
But if Hawke continues on this path, they eventually come face to face with a woman inexplicably named Charade. Charade Amel, the daughter Gamlen never knew he had. The only things Charade ever knew about her father was how he cared only for treasure. But that isn't true. Any examination of Gamlen begins and ends with his need to feel loved by his parents. Leandra was their favorite child. When Leandra fled the country with a runaway mage, they still loved her more than Gamlen, who stayed loyal by their side.
So, the best way to make Daddy love you was to steal his money?
I changed their filthy sheets and wiped their chins through 2 bouts of the cholera, and the last word Father said was... Leandra.
And in their will, they left everything to her.
To my daughter Leandra, and all children born of her, the estate in Hightown and all associated revenues.
Check out the part where Gamlen is left only a stipend, to be controlled by you.
Gamlen, how could you?
You're the one who ran away, Leandra. What happened to love is so much more important than money.
Gamlen spent years drinking, gambling, and adventuring Leandra's precious inheritance away, even losing the family estate to slavers. During these self-destructive years, he met Charade's mother, and she obviously didn't understand the psychological source of his destructive ways, and pegged him as only being a treasure hunter. Charade's mother has since passed away, and Charade threw this whole scavenger hunt together to feel wanted by her father. Hawke can convince her to simply go talk to her father. And after all these years, and all these losses, Gamlen Amell can finally have a family member that loves him and wants to be in his life.
I need some time to think about all this, but if it's all right, I'd like to come back and talk more.
I think I'd like that.
Or Hawke could have listened to Gamlen and just left the letter alone. No one in the family would know Charade had even existed. Or Hawke could tell Charade to leave. Or Hawke could take the treasure from Charade. But I love Gamlen, and I only ever reunite the two.
She looks nothing like you. Thank the Maker for small miracles, hmm?
Really? Hey. You know, I may not say this very often, but I'm glad you're one of the family. But seriously, next time, stay out of my damn business, boy.
The low point for Act 3 is Best Served Cold. Best Served Cold has all the problems with the final mission of the game, but with absolutely none of the good qualities. Meredith, or bizarrely Orsino, calls Hawke into the gallows. There's a Templar mage conspiracy, and Hawke needs to get to the bottom of it. Very quickly, it becomes apparent this conspiracy is to remove Meredith. Templars and mages alike agree that she's dangerous and power-mad. And Hawke, even a Hawke who is firmly pro-mage and anti-Meredith, has to kill this conspiracy. Characters Hawke has helped throughout the game, like Thrask, Grace, and Elaine, all blissfully forget this fact and kidnap a loved one of Hawke's, just so they can threaten Hawke to stay out of their attempt to remove Meredith.
Though I can't understand why you side with Meredith now. You showed me we can stand up to her. When you fought off Karas's thugs to save those mages. Please, champion. I have nothing but respect for you. It's Meredith we must see gone.
Your cause is just, but I take issue with your methods.
That's not what I said!
This whole quest can mostly work for pro-Templar Hawks, but even then, a pro-Templar Hawke might agree that Meredith should step down. Most Templars in the game hold this belief.
I have seen madness before. I saw Uldred's eyes when there was nothing human left in them. The Knight Commander. She is not there yet, but I do not have to ask where the rumors come from.
But as a pro-Mage Hawke, the entire mission is nonsense from the word go. Orsino charging Hawke to stop a Mage Templar alliance devoted to remove Meredith? That same alliance attacking Hawke on sight again and again, regardless of how many times Hawke tells them they support them? The only way I can make sense of this quest is that while in development, Bioware planned on having two very different Act 3s. One Act 3 for a Templar supporter, and one Act 3 for a Mage supporter. But at some point in development, they realized they wouldn't make their deadline with two tailored Act 3s. And so the missions that were the closest to complete would be the entirety of Act 3. Which is why Act 3 is only 3 missions long, and are really pro-Templar bent. This is the worst quest in the game. It completely ignores your choices, and since the act ends with Anders blowing up the Chantry and Hawke and company having to react to that, the two quests preceding the Chantry explosion add nothing to the conflict. And at this point in the game, we've already said all there is to say about mages, Templars, blood magic, and abominations anyway. It might have been better if Act 3 was just a more reactive and better written version of the last mission, instead of 3 disconnected missions.
Meredith's to blame for what's happening, not the champion.
Don't defy me, boy. Without me, you'd be nothing. If you're too squeamish, I'll do it myself.
No. No one has to die here.
Oh, but that's where you're wrong.
Restrain yourself.
Forget the hostage. Kill the champion.
What the hell was that?
The game eventually had 3 major DLCs. The Exiled Prince, which added a new companion, Legacy, and Mark of the Assassin. The Exiled Prince gave us Sebastian Vale, a character that isn't too loved by the community. I feel Sebastian adds a lot to the themes of loss and ambition. He also brings a unique perspective to the Mage Templar conflict, as he's a member of the Chantry. To him, the conflict isn't one of secular freedoms versus security. It's a divine commandment that magic exists to serve man, not rule him. Sebastian is a man torn apart by his conflicted nature. Is he a clergyman, or is he a prince?
I keep asking myself, do I want this because it's right? Or simply to have what I never thought I could?
Aren't you your parents' heir?
I'm the youngest son of 3. My parents were rather traditional. They wanted the heir and the spare, and I was left in the cold. They put me in the Chantry to prevent my competing with my brothers.
And in which role would he better serve his people? Princes wage wars and get people killed. The clergy, they offer guidance. Just as he's torn in his oaths, Sebastian is equally divided by his anger. The loss of his parents brings out his need for vengeance. It's not enough to find out who's responsible for their deaths. He needs the entire mercenary company that was hired to do it killed to the last man.
Young Master Hawke destroyed Flint Company. None remain. Yet, now that I know who sent them, it's harder to see their deaths as justice.
And in the end, if Hawke spares Anders, Sebastian swears to raise the city with his army. He no longer cares about innocence in the way. He no longer cares about the Maker's will.
He dies, or I am returning to Starkhaven. And I will bring such an army with me on my return that there'll be nothing left of Kirkwall for these Maleficarum to rule.
I think Sebastian is as rich and deep of a character as Isabella, Varric, and Aveline, even if I don't particularly like him as much as I do those characters. The worst thing about the DLC was that it was a Day 1 DLC. Today, we live in a world with aggressive microtransactions, but in 2011, Day 1 DLC was controversial. Many saw it as content cut from the game and sold separately. I could believe, especially with the short development time, that Sebastian was not strictly cut content. After all, he's only playable in the last 2 acts of the game, and his integration into certain scenes seems clumsy.
There can be no peace.
Elfina, no! Maker, no!
The second DLC, Legacy, offers the player a traditional dungeon crawl. You head out to investigate why dwarven assassins are coming after Hawke and their surviving sibling. Along the way, we learn more about Hawke's father Malcolm, the Grey Wardens, and the Magister Sidriel as we meet Corypheus, the ancient Tevinter Magister. The combat is the star here, as the enemies are more varied and generally come at the player from a single direction, allowing for a more strategic combat experience. Enemies require more thought than in the original game. Shield-bearing Darkspawn require flanking attacks to dispatch quickly, and archers will take positions on the high ground or behind barriers. Character work with ambient dialogue is phenomenal. Varric, Carver, and Anders get a special focus, and it's more than welcome.
Did you just call me fat?
Yes, that's pretty much how I tell it. Hawke rolled into the fray like a gigantic pudding covered in gravy. It's more dramatic that way.
Legacy can start at any time in the game by simply clicking on a griffin statue in either Gamlen's house or the Hawke mansion. While it can be played at any time, I seriously recommend it sometime after All That Remains. At that time, the Hawke family's fate has already been decided. Liandra is dead, and the Hawke sibling is either dead, a Grey Warden, or living in the gallows. All of these fates are honored. Varric even pauses his story to embellish a scene with the memory of Liandra. It is one of the best moments in the game.
You know Malcolm wouldn't want you two to fight. He sacrificed so we'd have a life free to choose, not always agree. His burden must have been very like yours.
I do what I can. Sometimes it doesn't seem like enough.
You know, your father tried to help people the same way. Tried to fix trouble he saw in others. The best of him is still with you. The best of all of us. It's what makes you try so hard. You will always have that. We will always be family. It'll be all right.
The last DLC, Mark of the Assassin, gave us a fun and light heist story starring Felicia Day as Talus. I like the setting. In fact, it's gorgeous. I like the experimentation, both by adding in a hybrid class with Talus, the anti-mage rogue, and by adding a stealth portion to the game. But I do find both are a bit unsatisfying. To get the best out of Talus, you need tight control on her, as the AI will never use her optimally. And the stealth section was slow, tedious, and devoid of tension. And stealth gameplay relies on tension to work. The story doesn't really matter either. Talus hires Hawke to steal a jewel called the Heart of the Many, and Hawke agrees because that's necessary for the plot to continue. It's all a ruse anyway. Talus is actually a Qunari assassin, and she approaches Hawke because Hawke has an invitation to a fancy party at Chateau Haine, and she needs to get into that party to stop a Qunari traitor from selling secrets. Of course, her target isn't at the chateau yet, so you think she would just stalk the roads outside of the chateau and wait for him. Or as Talus is an elf, and elves are second-class citizens, she could easily infiltrate the waitstaff at the party without anyone noticing. But the point here isn't the story. It's about having fun. And there's actually loads of fun to be had.
If I die, make sure the world knows I died at Chateau Haine.
As for character writing, Talus is the star here. She's a Qunari convert who joined because Qunari seemed to offer a better alternative to Andrastian culture, especially with their handling of elves and poverty. Yet now that she's a Qunari, she's not so sure.
It's who I am. I joined the Ben Hasras because I felt it meant something. Means something.
You sound like you're trying to convince yourself.
It's been a long time since I talked to anyone about it.
Even she admits the Qunari could do better. She's conflicted and desperately tries to hold on to the Qun for answers. But her character never really changes in this story. It's just an introduction. I really hope Talus returns in another game. She's clearly heading for some tragedy of her own.
What you need is a purpose, a belief in unity, in improving the lot, not only for your own people, but for everyone.
You're talking about butchers out to destroy any sense of free will.
I'm talking about fighting to make things better.
One last thing of note with Mark of the Assassin and Talus. Felicia Day created a live-action tie-in web series called Dragon Age Redemption, which released at the same time as the DLC. It's fine. I really appreciate how much Felicia Day loves the universe. I just can't consider it canon. It's actually a strange tie-in when you think about it, but it's also not the only strange tie-in for Dragon Age 2. There's also the anime movie Dragon Age Dawn of the Seeker, which told Cassandra's origin story, and that movie is genuinely awful. Finally, there's the cancelled DLC, The Exalted March. Little was known about this DLC, but from what we could gather, it was going to be a banger. Set after the main game, the Chantry would have started a holy crusade against Kirkwall. This would have included Sebastian and his newly reclaimed army from Starkhaven. The Temple of Mythal story bit from Dragon Age Inquisition was originally meant for this, and the ending was going to break people's hearts, with companions dying, specifically Varric. It was going to be the largest DLC on offer, comparable in size to a true expansion set, but it was cancelled due to low sales and harsh fan criticism of the game. A lot of the Exalted March's ideas would be retrofitted into Dragon Age Inquisition, and while it's fun to speculate on how things would have played out if Hawke was the playable character in a story like Inquisition's, I'm actually glad the DLC was cancelled. Hawke is a tragic character, and while this DLC promised to bring sadness and more loss to the champion of Kirkwall, I like the ending Dragon Age 2 gives us. Hawke starts the game fleeing their home in Ferelden as a refugee, and Hawke ends the game fleeing their home in Kirkwall as a refugee. For all of their power and all of their sacrifice, they end up right back where they started, only worse for the experience. And I respect that Bioware chose to make a classical tragedy instead of the usual power fantasy. Hawke isn't infallible. Hawke's friends can betray them, and the romances are messy and somewhat toxic. Any other ending just wouldn't feel true. On the next episode, we go in depth with the themes of Dragon Age 2. And then we talk about one of the most controversial Bioware companions of all time.
Anders, what have you done?
Thank you for watching.